Yo, it's John Master Lee.
And Lulu.
And it is story time.
Yay!
Exaggeration. But this one's a good one, Lulu, because I don't think I ever told you the story about how I broke into the video game industry all those years ago. So if you want a little bit of a backgrounder, make sure you check out a previous video I made about how I lied to my family and all my friends about getting my first job in the video game industry. Because even though I actually did get a job offer from a company, they eventually rescinded the offer. I lost the opportunity. But I didn't want to tell my family this. So I basically said I still had the job. It was in California. And I packed up all my stuff. I knew I had to get to California. No matter what, I knew that if I really wanted to have a career in the game industry, which had been a lifelong dream of mine, I had to make it happen. And at the time, I really didn't know how I was going to go about looking for these jobs. Because unlike today, there was no websites that allowed you to just go and apply online, right? You can't just Google it. Because the game industry was so specific, I knew that I had to do one of a couple things to get really creative to get my foot in the door.
And what are those?
So, well, I continued to do the newspaper bit, right? Which is a lot like today's version of just blindly sending in a resume. It rarely ever works. I don't think people realize that, when they apply for a job, especially a popular job, they oftentimes get hundreds, if not thousands of applications. I've oftentimes get thousands of applications for people apply to my gaming company once I eventually broke in, right? You have a better shot of getting into Harvard than getting noticed for a job, any job out there. So what I had to do was good old fashioned, what I would call cold sales type of tactics. So one was I had a network. Because I knew that there were only like a few famous people in the industry, you could basically read through a bunch of gaming magazines and the people that do these interviews, right? The creators, the vice presidents, the producers of the company, their name would get mentioned. And I would try to find some way to get in touch with them. Back then, I had to find a way to just connect with somebody. And it actually works. For example, right, I was at this event and I saw someone that I recognized. And at the time, I basically said, hey, look, I saw you in an interview in a magazine and I just wanted to see if I can get some advice from you. And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. Now, everyone says that. But I actually did follow up trying to see if I can get him. And eventually, he met up with me. So the thing is that he wasn't involved directly in the hiring process. He wasn't involved in the area that I wanted to be in, which I really want to break into like game design, right? So he said, look, I'll just meet you outside and we'll chat. I'll kind of give you some pointer tips. So he, middle of his day, decided to meet in the parking lot of his company, which was Electronic Arts. And he just gave me some pointers. And honestly, those kind of connections, I will always remember to this day. I knew how to at least get my foot in the door. I just didn't know the best way to, present myself. And no one out of college knows how to do that. You have to learn these things. By the way, that person, his name was Frank Gibeau, who actually ended up becoming many, many years later, decades later, the president of EA Labels and currently the CEO of Zynga. Yeah, so, everyone starts from somewhere. And I hear a lot of things about him today about how he's a tough guy to work for. He's real hardcore. But I always remember him as someone who took the time out of his day to guide me. And those have always been the kind of experiences where I always remember them and I always go back to them and, a little tit for tat. I've worked with people, helped other people who've helped me along the way. Now, the other method that I used was trying to simply just walk into an office, right? And say, hey, are there any opportunities available? I'd love to drop off my resume. Now, the tricky part here is that most of these companies don't tell you what their address is. How would you find out where, EA's office is unless you knew where it was? So one of the things I ended up realizing was that if you go through the back of the boxes of some of these games, right, they actually have the addresses listed on the back. There was one company that I did get an address to, and it was for a back of a box for a game called Slipstream, which is a really cool racing game. And it was from a company that was called Front Street Publishing. And right below it, they had the address, 303 Sacramento Street. And so I knew, Front Street was a place in San Francisco. So I knew it was downtown and they had the exact address. So I said, all right, I'm going to go there and just see what happens. Put on my best suit, which honestly was just a really cheap suit that I bought at Men's Warehouse. I'm sure at a complete discount. Did not fit me at all. No one wears a suit into the game industry interview. Didn't know that back then. The minute you walk into these scenarios, you have to be hyper alert, but also try to not to be too nervous, right? Because you're a young kid coming in. And most game companies, they get a lot of fans that just kind of walk in. A lot of gaming companies get a lot of fans who just walk in, ultra curious. So you have to make sure you come across like someone who's professional versus just a fanboy, if you will. So I was trying to balance those two things out. So I walked in and I talked to the front desk person. I said, look, I'm interested in breaking the game industry. I've designed some games in the past. I know this is what I've done. I moved out to California. And the person was just really fascinated with my story. There was actually a woman, Marilyn Slater, who happened to hear my story, and she was the director of marketing. And she said, well, you know what? I'm actually hiring for my department. So if you're interested, let me know. Right? I'm happy to take your resume. Now, at the time, I was looking to apply for a gaming job in development. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? I could try to still get to that side of the business. If I talk with her, perhaps she could help me break in and then I can make the move. So I told her, you know what? That'd be really great. I would love to take a look at the opportunity. She described it as like a, entry-level marketing coordinator position, basically just being a peon, whatever they say you do type of job. Eventually they called me back, got an interview, and I got the job. Yeah, she was really impressed. In the marketing department. Now, the thing is that I think a lot of people, especially when they start, they're always saying, well, I want to be this, right? Not that. And if you really want to break into a particular industry, you really have to be open to many different paths to get into where you were. And for me, it wasn't so much that I thought about like, well, will I ever get to design? It's more of I thought of, well, in 10 years, I want to run my own game company. In 10 years, I want to be someone at the top, which means that if I can learn about how marketing worked and I learn how about design worked or QA, production, everything, that's going to be the best experience. I think that's the best way to think about any opportunity as you are starting off, right? Which is just any opportunity where you can learn something. I distinctly remember when I first went into that building, I was not impressed. I actually thought, oh my goodness, this cannot be a company that would ever do well. Because it's an old building, right? You can actually even Google it today. If you type in 303 Sacramento Street, it's this old historic building, which is why they never tore it down. To me, I was like, well, this is not gaming. It's not fancy. It's not cool and futuristic, unlike some of the other offices I saw. But US Gold happened to be the publishing arm for this development group called Core Design. I played a number of their games before and I loved them. They had great potential. And just so happens, one of the games they were working on next that I got to see that made me go like, this is why I want to work here. This is why I have to make sure it happened. It was a little game called Tomb Raider. That's right. This was the very first Tomb Raider game that they were working on for a new generation of consoles called the PlayStation 1. Back then, they didn't have CD-based console systems, right? And so this was the first time they can build really complex 3D worlds. And as I was playing through this and I was looking at the game, like, this is a game changer. These are the kind of opportunities that you would say, I will do anything to work on this, because if you can get your name associated with these games, you get the experience of being part of a big project. In the entertainment industry, the projects that become hugely successful can really elevate you. So that goes to show you how you really can't judge a book by its cover. You can't judge a company by the building it's in. You can't think of, well, who's ever heard of Front Street Publishing, let alone US Gold? Well, US Gold was a company literally within half a year of me being there, merged with a bunch of other companies to form this company called Eidos. And Eidos became one of the biggest gaming publishers of all time over the years, in large part thanks to the success of Tomb Raider. And that was one of the first big games that I worked on. Doesn't matter how the times have changed. Doesn't matter if it's a different career field. There's no mapped out path of how to get there. The whole point is, how do you solve this problem of breaking in? And a lot of it is just sheer willpower of getting connected to the right people, setting yourself up for success, and turning those lucky breaks into something that happen often.
What a story. It's memorable for you. Just to go to a very brand new state.
Yeah, on the other side of the United States, with everything I own that fit into a back of a trunk. Because it's a two-seater. I didn't even have a back seat. All right, y'all. that's a story for today. And if you want to hear more of these stories, because I tell you, I got many, I'm happy to share them with you.
That's right. You got lots of stories.